Welcome back. Back with another banger. It's the React Files. Hope you're having a good night. Let's get straight to it.
Okay. I'm just trying to find a little quiet corner so I'm actually able to speak to you guys. But holy crap. I don't think I gathered up the magnitude of the event that I was attending, because all 13, actually it's more than 32 world leaders, it's 39 world leaders that are in this building right now. I don't think there has been an event where more than 39 of some of the most powerful countries in the world are under one roof. So because of that, the security is insane. And the decisions that they're making today affect over 1 billion people that are in NATO. And then obviously anything that they decide is going to affect billions more because, because I don't need to explain. And then because of what they're doing, there are 2,000 journalists here. 2,000. I don't think there's any event, maybe like World Cup final, if that. And like, I'll show you the videos and the pictures of the rooms when I get there. And here's the part that's really, really cool. And this is just like, this is the most proud part for me, is the content creators that they invited have access to places and people that journalists don't. Like, just think about the significance of that for a second and how far content creators in general have come. 5 years ago, there was no content creators at all invited. And then today, here we are. So that's a really important point for all of us. Anyway, I'm going to take you throughout the day and see what's going on. I can promise you, no dodgy backroom deals have been struck. And I am still alive, and I'm not going to be cloned if I hear one bit about that. All right, we'll see you later.
He said he ain't going to be cloned. Like, he kind of took offense. That's amazing, though. 2,000 journalists, most of them content creators. I wonder what they're planning on revealing. Like, what's the significance of this big event?
At that time, I was given a cosmic top secret clearance, which was and still is the highest level of security access that NATO has. When I was assigned to the war room, I learned that a study had been initiated in 1961, and everybody was talking about it. They were gossiping about it. And the subject was UFOs, and that intrigued me a bit. When that study was concluded in 1964, and it was published, and I was still working in the war room at that time, I had access to this document. I had a chance to read it. And having been exposed to it, I must tell you honestly that my life has never ever quite been the same. Because I read first-hand reports, verifiable NATO military material that indicated that the UFOs were not only real, but they represented something far beyond anything I had ever imagined before. When the study was concluded in '64, they concluded that there were 4 different groups apparently coming and visiting us. Out of those 4 different groups, one group looked exactly like we do, so much so that they could sit beside you in a restaurant, or in an airplane, or in a theater, and you'd never know. And that particular point bothered the military guys a lot. The point being that some of these people from somewhere could be walking up and down the corridors of SHAPE headquarters, or they could be walking up and down the corridors of the Pentagon. One day at lunch, a lieutenant colonel made the remark, he says, "Jesus, do you realize they could even be in the White House?" And there was a little forced laughter at that point, I remember, because a lot of us over the years have had some misgivings about the occupants of the White House. But the point I'm making is that the idea that aliens could be here in our midst bothered the military, because if you're not paranoid when you go into the service, you're certainly trained very quickly to be so. It's the nature of the military mind, I think, to be paranoid. But that was only part of the story. The SHAPE conclusions in '64 were that there were 4 groups that we knew of. They were apparently interplanetary. Some very likely were interstellar. They even concluded that some of them could be intergalactic. When I retired in 1976, many of our military people knew at that point that we were not simply dealing with visitations from people from other planets or star systems. They had concluded by 76 that some of these visitors very well might be multidimensional in their source. The evidence that we had collected and the evidence that they had repeatedly demonstrated to us, and that's no accident. It became very clear after a time that there was a program or a process of some kind underway, that they had demonstrated over and over and over again that they apparently were able to manipulate matter and time. Now, this really shook up our scientists. There are a lot of new young scientists in particle physics today who talk about multiple dimensions. There's a brilliant young professor in New York by the name of Michio Kaku, who has written a brilliant book called Hyperspace, where they talk about 10 separate dimensions. I'm not enough of a physicist to try to explain to you what a dimension is, but the idea that there could be intelligences from somewhere else, from other dimensions coming and going into our reality. It's been quite a shakeup in traditional science. I guess I speak out openly and bluntly about this because I feel so strongly about it. I violate my security oath every time I speak about it. I do it intentionally and I do it on purpose, because I feel so strongly that the American people not only have a right to know the truth, but they have a need to know the truth. The truth, Don, apparently is simply this, that we're not alone, we've never been alone. We are apparently part of an infinite universe filled with intelligent life.
Robert Dean, retired military personnel, talking about a document called the assessment he said he saw. With that type of information, I can imagine why they were so paranoid.
So this is going on in China right now, you guys, as we speak. It seems that Jiangxi, the biggest commercial banking, went bankrupt, and at least 40 banks under them disappeared overnight, y'all. This is crazy. This is the Chinese people over here, and they are in front of this big building, this big bank, trying to get their money back. Yeah, they seem angry, y'all. And I find it funny how in movies they depict Chinese people with their martial arts, breaking doors down, but you have the most non-confrontational people on earth over here, literally. All I'm saying is, if this was America, the story would be a lot different. That's for sure, y'all. This is crazy. So I hope you guys are aware when China goes through something, that means America is next, because China is the forerunner. But yeah, y'all see what's going on. I don't think there's been a year in history that's come close as to what 2024 has to offer us thus far. For more videos like this, please do me a favor and go follow my other page at Let's Get This Shift on TikTok, because things are shifting really, really quickly, y'all, and y'all need to stay ahead. You can also go follow me on my Instagram, my YouTube, and my Facebook. Thank you for tuning to my frequency. Let's get this shift. Peace in.
Shout out to Conscious Juice with some real valuable information. The bank went down overnight and 40 banks went with it. Yeah, we be acting a fool over here if that happened. Man, I give them a lot of credit, but that's crazy.
As I began to explore the sites, specifically a location known as Abu Sir and the Pyramid of Neferkare, we were exploring the site and I found this red quartzite collection bowl and conduit system that runs from the pyramid itself underneath this huge floor of black basalt into this collection bowl. Mm-hmm. And that's when I began to develop the idea that they were producing and collecting aqueous solutions of chemicals. So generally speaking, my theory is that the Egyptian pyramids are a series of chemical reactors that were designed to produce at least a half dozen different chemicals in series, but they were powered by electric fields coming from lightning, which I'm sure we'll get to here in a little bit. So overall, that's my theory, is that the Egyptian pyramids were designed for chemical engineering and chemical manufacturing.
So what made you come to this conclusion about them being chemical processors and the bowls being collectors of chemicals? Do you have a background in chemistry?
No. So I have a degree in psychology and a minor in Spanish and just sort of a lifelong passion for chemistry and physics. And I was really inspired by first the collection bowl in Abu Sir. And then our next expedition was to go inside of the Red Pyramid of Dashur. And as soon as I went down into these reaction chambers, I noticed that there was chemical staining all over the walls inside of the Red Pyramid, which was very, very unusual. And typically the explanation for the staining is that it's somehow caused by bats. And I knew immediately when I heard that explanation that there's no way that was the actual explanation for what's causing this staining. And fast forward now 5 years later, we have a chemical analysis from samples of that staining that were taken from the walls of the chambers that conclusively prove it has absolutely nothing to do with bats. It is extrusions of metal compounds that are coming out of the stone itself due to high temperature reactions occurring inside of these chambers and fluctuations in temperature and pressure. So you got to imagine like a sponge, right? Squeezing out liquid material. So the stone itself has to be heated to a high enough temperature to be able to liquefy these compounds. And there has to be fluctuations of pressure inside of the structure that cause these extrusions to come out of the stone. So that was the first thing I noticed inside of the Red Pyramid that began to inspire the idea that these were designed for chemical reactions.
Now that's interesting. Sounds like Breaking Bad.
They say this is made in heaven, and it might just open a portal into another dimension. It actually might be a variation of something called an Euler's disk, named after mathematician Leonard Euler, which looks like Euler. And if it never stops, you might be dreaming. It's a disk that's intentionally designed to continuously fall for a very, very long time, and this is how it does that. As the disk spins and rolls, or spoles, it starts doing something called precessing due to gravity, causing it to wobble, with a fall that can last upwards to 3 minutes or even longer. Precession is just a change in orientation of a spinning object's rotational axis. Quite a mouthful, but all it means is that the imaginary line that cuts through a rotating object is constantly changing where it's pointing. Kind of like the Earth does. It rotates to create day-night cycles, and its axis of orientation slowly changes where it's pointing over time, finishing a complete cycle every 26,000 years, also known as a great year. This glass disc was purposely engineered to lose energy as slowly as possible as it comes to a complete stop. As the disc loses kinetic energy, the angle between the disc and the surface beneath gets smaller and smaller while the precession of the rolls approaches infinity. Don't worry, I don't fully understand it either, but this approach to infinity creates a rapid whirring motion that almost feels like it's about to open a portal into another dimension. Mathematically, this disk should technically spool forever and just keep getting faster until the end of time. But it comes to a complete stop due to friction, vibration, and air resistance. You know, physics getting in the way. The length of the fall can be extended even more if it's spun on a mirrored surface using the signature Euler's disk design of a chrome-plated steel puck, held in a balance between gravity pushing it down and an upwards force exerted by the vibration of the mirror base. The low-friction mirror slows down the energy loss even more and is slightly indented in the middle, which helps it keep going too. And no one technically actually knows the exact details of how this particular Euler's disk design even works, apart from its inventor, Joseph Bendick, as it's a trade secret and this disk is trademarked and sold by only one company.
It's pretty interesting. I wonder how much they cost. Still got lots of questions. I feel like I've seen this done in a movie before.
These CIA documents reveal that thought waves can become a physical particle. Thoughts manipulate your universal hologram, which is your electromagnetic field. This proves that we are in a three-dimensional construct, which is a holographic world, and your thoughts and emotions manipulate this three-dimensional construct. You literally create your own reality based off your thoughts. You are an invisible consciousness, which is controlling this physical avatar, which manipulates the holographic construct of the external world through your thoughts and emotions. The things you own in life, the friends you have, are all reflections of your past thoughts. You are a result of your thoughts. The elites know this knowledge, and this is why they keep you on the lowest vibration possible so that you manifest the worst possible reality. This is why they're called a government. Ment means mind. They govern your mind through information. Your information is your perception, and your perception's your reality. The word of the day is, people, you can get anything you want in this life just by working and changing your thoughts. When you change your thoughts, further down the line, your external world will change because your external world mirrors your thoughts. We are literally in a holographic game, people.
Mind over matter. Some truly underrated content right here. But yeah, he's speaking my language.
The gentleman with which I was associated was approximately 3.5 feet tall. He had a dark brown appearance, very ruddy appearance to his skin. He was in a highly pressurized clean sphere. 3.5 feet, large head in comparison to torso. large, bulbous black eyes. The whites of the eyes had been selected out, so it looked like a large pupil, basically. When you look into his eyes, you feel like you're going to fall into his eyes forever. And I think that probably had something to do with the telepathic nature of his mental structure. He was hunched over most of the time, could not support himself fully, given muscular atrophy, and that had to do with the peripheral neuropathy under which he was suffering. He was unclothed, which bothered him. He wanted to wear clothing and was refused in every turn. Called himself captive, and justifiably so. His facial features were grotesque in comparison to what he showed me what normal would be. Nose was recessed, an extremely small mouth, a hard palate, no teeth.
Do you have any idea what his chronological age was?
622. They excrete in a manner that we would excrete. Their external genitalia are different than ours. The females have somewhat like vulva, but they have a clasper situation. The male has a male clasper, the female claspers. And if it looks like a disc with rectangular solids that are rotated into position for clasping at the inguinal region. They do have internal fertilization.
Now, this was something you read because you didn't see a female, did you?
No, this is something he showed me of his wife. Everything that he showed me when this was the incident, when he projected it into me, it felt like I was there. He was extremely depressed. If we were to term him human, I'm not a psychologist, but I think he would be termed as clinically depressed. Okay. He wept, but he didn't weep outside. He wept when he was with me.
Well, could you estimate what his level of intellect was?
Smarter than me. He was smarter than me by a long range.
Did he have a wide range of knowledge?
The mathematics that he showed me blew my mind.
Was that right?
He showed me concurrently not only the equations for the rule of nines, but he also did so diagrammatically, and he did so with three-dimensional, like a VRML system, where I was watching cubes come together. Highly evolved, highly intellectual, highly repressed emotionally. When I was with him, I felt great happiness to be with him, but I could feel his great sadness, not only because of what he wanted to become, what he knew he was by being present with us, but where he was and how he was being treated. He was not part of the group that has to be catered to involving the T9 treaty that was just signed. He wanted to help. He was willing. When I went in, for God's sakes, I took well over, nearly 300 individualized aspiration samples from his neurological system. He would hold his arm out for me to take them. There was no pain medication. And whenever I would fire the introduction system to remove the sample, it was an aspirative avulsion system, he would cry. And then he would just stand there and look at me.
Yeah, that was Dan Burrish giving his very vivid account of what seems experiments on the alien. He was very vivid. Said it was smarter than him, showing him the rule of nines. I wonder what this T9 treaty is all about.
So this little kid, he might be one of the best con artists I've ever seen. Let me show you. Now, his name is Juan Carlos, and he lives in Colombia, and so far, he's had a really hard life. But Juan Carlos is about to do what whatever it takes to succeed. So one day, he sets out to make that happen, and he heads to the local airport to catch a flight to Miami. But little Juan Carlos, he can't afford a plane ticket. So he sneaks onto the tarmac and he climbs onto a cargo plane, and he hides out in the wheel well, and he allegedly holds on real tight while the plane takes off and flies 3.5 hours from Cali, Colombia to Miami, Florida. Then the plane lands, and allegedly Juan Carlos falls out of the wheel well, and he just lays there on the tarmac unconscious. And airport staff, they eventually find him, and he's shivering and he's disoriented and he's just a wreck. But he tells them not that his name is Juan Carlos, but that his name is Guillermo, and that he's 13 and from Colombia, and that his parents had died, and that he doesn't have anyone else, so he fled to America. And his story just blows people away, because they feel sorry for him. And so the local media, they start covering it. Then a police officer in the area, this guy, Lozano, he's driving home one day, and he hears the story on the radio, that they found this 13-year-old kid who had been hiding in the wheel well of a plane. And Lozano is so moved, he goes and he volunteers to be Juan Carlos's temporary guardian, while the state figures out what to do with him. So Juan Carlos goes and he lives with Lozano and his family. And this changes his life. Suddenly, he's not living in poverty anymore. And this middle-class lifestyle feels like wealth to him. And they've got all these nice things, and so he tells himself that soon he's gonna have nice things too. And within a few weeks of living with Lozano's family, Juan Carlos starts stealing, and things around the house go missing. Plus, he's been disappearing for days at a time, and Lozano and his wife, they start thinking that something isn't adding up about this kid. Then, one day, they get a call, and it's the Colombian consulate, who had just gotten some important information. Turns out, Juan Carlos isn't actually named Guillermo. He's named Juan Carlos, and he isn't some innocent kid. He's actually got a criminal record. And he isn't 13. He's actually 17. And his parents aren't dead. They're actually alive and well back in Colombia. And he probably didn't ride in the wheel well of that plane. It's more likely that he rode inside the plane with the cargo. And he just lied about it all because it made a better story. So Juan Carlos is just a little con artist, trying to con his way into the United States so that he can have a better life. And so, bam, they immediately detain him, and they deport him back to Colombia. Oh, but this isn't over for Juan Carlos, because for a moment, he got a taste of a much better life, and he'll do anything to get that back. So, over the years, Juan Carlos tries his best to scam his way out of Colombia, and get back into the US and other countries, using different aliases and fake IDs, but he ends up getting deported, like a bunch of different times. And while all this is going on, Juan Carlos, he's there developing the perfect con. Here's his perfect con. Juan Carlos dresses up real nice, pretending to be a rich man, and he goes into a 5-star hotel, and he tries to make it look like he's a guest there. He hangs out in the lobby and at the hotel bar, and he'll chat with the staff a little bit just to make sure that they notice him. And as he's doing this, he also takes note of other guests. He'll memorize their name, he'll memorize their room number, then he'll go to reception, pretending to be that guest. And he'll say that he lost his room key, and reception, they'll recognize him like, oh, this guy, he's been hanging out in the lobby for a few days. Of course he's a guest here. So the hotel will let him in the room. And while he's there, he'll steal money and credit cards and jewelry and whatever he can get out of the guest's luggage. Then, to make it worse, he'll then call the hotel security desk and tell them he's locked out of his safe. And security, they'll come up to the room and they'll open the safe for him. And they don't question anything because he's already in the room. So of course they think it's his room. So then Juan Carlos takes everything from the safe and he leaves the hotel, a slightly richer man. And this con works. In fact, it works really well for him. So Juan Carlos does it repeatedly, hotel after hotel after hotel, just raking it in. Until one day in London, boom, he gets arrested for using a credit card he had stolen. But Juan Carlos, he's ready for this. He's been thinking about it a while, and he gives police a fake name and he skips bail and leaves town. And then a year later, he's back in London, pulling off his same con, and then bam, he gets arrested again for using another stolen credit card. This time, he gives them a different fake name and a fake ID. And and he ends up getting off with a small fine because they don't realize he's the same guy they arrested the year before. So Juan Carlos continues with this pattern. He travels the world using fake names, fake IDs, and robbing hotels. But a few years later, he makes his way back to London again. And there, he hits 4 more hotels and leaves with over $100,000 worth of cash and jewelry. Now, at this point, a couple of London detectives have started to take notice. This detective, Swindells, and this other detective, Plowman. So Swindells and Plowman, they've started to piece a lot of this together, and they end up connecting a bunch of these robberies back to the thief, Juan Carlos. Meanwhile, old Juan Carlos, he's already fled. He's living the good life. He's got money, he's got clothes, he finally has nice things like he's always wanted. But it's just not enough. So Juan Carlos keeps going. And within a couple of years, he ends up in Las Vegas, where he pulls off his infamous scam and he ends up stealing $350,000 worth of cash and jewelry. And one of the hotel rooms he robs is allegedly Celine Dion's room. So that's fun. And then, about a year later, Juan Carlos is back in London again. And he hits up even more hotels. But then, one night, Swindells, he's out, and he's walking back from a bar he was just at. And he just happens to stop outside of a supermarket. And he sees a man leaving that supermarket. A man wearing a long leather jacket. And Swindells recognizes him. Because by sheer fucking coincidence, he just crossed paths with the Juan Carlos. Now, Swindells has never seen Juan Carlos in person, only in mugshots. But he's been working on this case a long time, and he knows it's him. So then, pow, Swindells arrests him, and he goes to trial, and he's sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. Oh, but this story isn't over, because Juan Carlos really likes his nice things. So 3 months later, he's in prison, and he happens to have a dentist appointment. And he ends up charming the prison guards to let him go out to his dentist appointment alone. I guess this is some kind of like open prison where they're not as strict. And so they just let him go to the dentist alone. And of course, he flees. And from there, somehow, he makes his way to Dublin, where he steals a credit card and pulls his infamous scam in yet another hotel. And that is where he screws up, because that puts this Irish detective on the case. This guy, McGlynn. Now McGlynn, he goes and he looks at CCTV footage from some of the stores that Juan Carlos had used that stolen credit card at. And pretty quickly, he identifies the thief in the footage. He knows it's Juan Carlos, the same guy who had walked out of prison not too long before. So McGlynn investigates further, and he concludes that Juan Carlos must have just gotten to Dublin. So he's likely staying in a cheap hostel in the city where he can keep a low profile. So McGlynn spends 2 days searching all these hostels in Dublin. And then he finally finds Juan Carlos hiding out in a hostel with tons of items he had already stolen. And so kapow, he gets arrested again. Here's one of his mugshots. And he gets sentenced to 2 years in prison, but then an Irish judge rules that he can be extradited to France to face even more charges there, because he robbed a bunch of hotels there too. But then, while he's there in France, he's released temporarily, and then just like that, Juan Carlos disappears again. A few years later, he's busted by a customs agent at a gas station in Vermont after he had entered the US illegally. And he's sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. And after that, he gets out and he's arrested again in a hotel in Hong Kong. Then he's arrested in France again for robbing another hotel of over $200,000 worth of cash and jewelry. And from there, he's sentenced to prison again for 15 months. This dude is allergic to freedom. But now he's out, and his current whereabouts are actually unknown. But I'm just going to take a wild guess and say he's probably still out there robbing more hotel rooms. So shout out to Colombia, London, Miami, Dublin, Las Vegas, France, Hong Kong, and Vermont.
Shout outs to the real Ray Williams. Juan Carlos does not learn. What a story. That's crazy. An international thief is what he was. I like how I switched up to the Legos. That was pretty cool.
Did you know that Satan was the one writing the music that you guys listen to? If you didn't, I'll prove it right here and show you one of the biggest witches and warlocks that do it. Getting music channeled by Satan and demons goes back centuries. We even have records where people said they heard the song played directly from Satan in their head. But now we're talking about witches and warlocks, people that summon Satan himself. Barry said, I believe Satan was writing the song while going over the music. This gets quite scary because not only do they give your favorite artist the words for the song, they tell them how to sing it in every syllable to create backwards messages. We'll get to that in 1 minute. This right here is Max Martin. You'd be very surprised the amount of songs that he let his body be taken over by Satan and then wrote for you. He's the biggest warlock in the industry. Working with every artist you can think of, he channels the songs by Satan, writes them, and they perform them. These are all songs channeled by the warlock. Baby One More Time, It's Gonna Be Me, I Kissed a Girl, Katy Perry, So What, California Girls, are you getting the point? Teenage Dream, One More Night, Dark Horse, Shake It Off, all songs Perversion. Those were just the songs he channeled on the Billboard. He has written more than 3,000 by the power of Satan. Not only did he write the music for them, he made them perform it a certain way, especially syllables, notes. Watch this. Hit Me Baby One More Time. Backwards. I'm not going to repeat what that just said. Bookmark this video, come study later. Back to the next witch. Now this right here will surprise you. Dolly Parton. Not only has she written thousands of songs by channeling, she's also written part of movies and musicals. These actors are under the same thing. Everything is channeled in the spiritual world and released to them, and they just perform. Y'all, this is not new. This has been the music industry. There's the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club's Band album cover, and here's Aleister Crowley. Mainstream music has always been channeled by devils, demons, fallen angels, and Lucifer himself, who is the angel with musical instruments inside of him. Deals with the devil are absolute fact. I have no idea how people do not see it.
Shoutouts to Inspired by the King. Yeah, I've heard of those songs playing backwards, but hearing it with Britney Spears was a little extra creepy.
Did you know your heart is not actually a pump? Wait until you hear this. The heart is in the shape of a chestahedron, a seven-sided shape where all of the surface areas are the same. When placing a chestahedron in a box, it sits on an angle of 36 degrees off-center. This is the same angle which the heart sits in the chest, hence why it's called a chestahedron. Placing a chestahedron in water creates a vortex in the water, and your heart tissues is in a vortex spiral. Your heart is actually one muscle, but wrapped in a spiraling vortex form. This is because your heart is a vortex energy generator. Blood enters the heart and creates a vortex spiral inside of the heart. Your heart turns water in the blood into plasma, the fourth state of water, which they'll never tell you about. Plasma makes up approximately 55% of your blood. The earth is electromagnetic. The reason why heart rearranged is earth is because the heart takes the electromagnetic energy of the earth and turns this into plasma in the blood to run the physical body. Your heart is directly connected to the universe, to the electromagnetic energy of the earth. This is why we always see Jesus pointing at his heart. Your heart is inside of the chest. This is where the treasure is, inside of the heart. Your heart contains 40,000 neurons, which is the exact same cells in your brain. The heart is the emotional brain which gives you guidance. It tells you what is right and what is wrong. This is why we say follow your heart. There's so much more that goes into the heart. I teach everything in the new lecture in my university.
Shout out to Revival of Wisdom. Seems like he got the university going. Still got to get that book. There's some good stuff right here. It's just great information.
I saw it come into the sky from the top of the mountain range and go straight up and do a 90-degree angle toward us, and I called it to the attention of Don, John, and Sue. And they saw it too, and it was there. I was not on dope or alcohol or anything like that. And it came, starting doing really erratic things in the sky. It was a small white light and very easy to see. We were not mistaking anything. It came over to the car, flipped over and went around on the other side of toward the other hills and came back, sailed above the car. By this time, because it was so close, it was 8 lanes freeway, at least in diameter and even a little wider, saucer-shaped, a very white, luminescent light emitted from the entirety of it. The ship stayed above us, out in front of us, about a minute or two, and we watched it, and none of us were saying a thing. And we just kept driving, and it kept staying in front of us. And then out of the perimeter of it, closest to us, came 4 white beams of light, very much like funnel-shaped, smaller at the perimeter, and they descended upon us and came around each one of our bodies. And out of each one of our bodies, we started to float into that beam of light. The best description would be molecularly being dispersed. And when I looked over at Don and Sue and John, their bodies, their legs and their bottoms are still on the car seat, and their heads and their shoulders and their chest molecules were going through the roof of the car, along with mine. We didn't lose consciousness while this happened. We were completely conscious of going through the roof. And the bottom molecules of our body were coming through too, and we were about 3.5 or 4 feet outside the car, going toward the ship, and we hit an energy field, a strong one, and remembered nothing. Next thing I did remember, we were coming back, the same process, going back into the car.
It wasn't until several years later that Helen realized she had experienced more than she remembered. Mental images, which she couldn't explain, caused her to visit a specialist who put her through a memory regression. In this relaxed state, Helen recalled the evening in question and described in detail the experience of being taken aboard the UFO.
I came to, and standing in front of me was a very tall man with whitish hair, kind of bronze, beautifully tan type of skin. And he had a long type of robish gown on, and he was looking at me, and very, very friendly. And he said he supposed I'd like to know what we were doing here. And I looked around, and I did want to know. There was a huge room that we were in that had a hallway off the front and a hallway off to the side. And there were round curved hallways. The room was very light. Iridescent light radiated all over, but you didn't see a light bulb anywhere. In fact, you didn't see hardly anything except for the swivel chairs we were sitting in. And he proceeded to help me up, and then we walked together over to the screen in front of us, across the room, and he showed us some information, pictures, and it was very cordial and very easy to talk with. The man spoke to me in English, but concurrent with everything he said was a great deal of telepathic communication, and it was completely peaceful feeling. It all made sense. He showed us a screen with many images on it that clarified some of the things he was saying. He also said that he'd been around with the other people there for thousands of years, and that they had been picking up people and giving information to people for the use of putting it into this world, into this society, to bring about a lot of better changes. And the interesting thing was that there are some people, he indicated, who we know and read about, who were given information by him. This is what he told me. And there was no fear. That's predominant, I think, in everything. And then we came back to the room. We were put back in the car the same way as we were taken out. And just this tremendous sense of peace, and that there was a lot more going on than we had originally thought.
What a story. Definitely sounds trippy how they got from the car to the ship, but still very interesting.
They said, I was talking to my wife about needing a new mattress in our bedroom. And the next day they're getting advertising for mattresses, which means the camera or the phone was listening to them in their bedroom, with all the follow-on conclusions to be drawn from that.
Yeah, given what happens in healthy bedrooms, so what happens to those recordings?
Well, we've been doing a study following our device, a Google Mobile Services phone, any Android running Google Mobile Services, which is all of them, or an iPhone, and at about 3 a.m., we're seeing a spike of data leaving the phone, about 50 megabytes. That is basically that phone dialing home to the mothership, exporting all of your goings on.
All your pillow talk is going to
pillow talk, whatever. Right. So Zuckerberg paid $20 billion for WhatsApp. Why? Because every message, call, video, picture, voice note, everything that goes through there, they say, well, it's end-to-end encrypted. Yeah, it's end-to-end until it passes to their server, where it's sliced and diced and analyzed and used to sell advertising to that customer. If you're not paying for something, you're not the customer, you are the product. So if you want to get, well, I think people right now are used to Mark Zuckerberg listening from their nightstand every night, because that's effectively what what your phone.
So why isn't he like the creepiest person in world history if he's listening to what's going on in your bedroom?
Because they're able, as big tech, to shape that message. That's the frightening thing about the power of big tech and their ability to influence what you watch, what you think about candidates. If you search something, how they score those rankings. It is shocking. We have an antitrust problem here in America, vastly worse than in the late 1800s, early 1900s with oil and railways.
Yeah, this
and
is not
steel
the
and all
sugar
the
trust.
rest.
This is more important.
Yeah, this is literally how we communicate and interact with other human beings in our lives, how we gather and share information about the realities of life.
Yeah, that's a creepy idea for real. All pillow talk being uploaded to a server.
Approximately 8 miles east of Mansfield, our crew chief, Sergeant Robert Yanisek, observed a red light on the east horizon.
Did you gentlemen see the same red light?
Yes, I did. Our helicopter was flying on a northerly heading. We were flying at an altitude of 2,500 feet. He indicated that the light seemed to be facing the helicopter, moving along in a parallel direction with our aircraft.
Which direction from the helicopter was the at?
Moving, it was to our right, to the right side of the helicopter, and it was moving with us as we were heading north towards Cleveland. And at this time, he indicated that the light changed its direction, was coming directly at the helicopter at the same altitude. And as the helicopter was maintaining a speed of 90 knots, the object came at a terrific speed from the horizon. We estimated 15 miles. Visibility was reported 15 miles that night.
Did you gentlemen see the object at this time, after it had been pointed out by the sergeant?
No, not at that time. I was flying left seat or co-pilot, and visibility from that seat from an object approaching from the right is rather limited. So I was having a difficulty seeing the object. And it was for that reason that Major Boyne did take the aircraft or the controls from me.
I grabbed the controls from Lieutenant Jetsy because I thought it was going to hit us. I braced for impact. With that, I pushed the collective down to get the helicopter to start to descend. I then looked at the altimeter. It was showing 1,700 feet, and we were descending 1,000 feet a minute. The helicopter began to descend, and as this object came at the helicopter, it seemed to descend with the helicopter. When the helicopter went down, the object came down, but it still came directly at our broadside, as if to hit the helicopter from the right side.
Did anyone else see the object at this time?
Yes, I was watching it come out of the east horizon. And the only thing I felt was when the skipper took over the controls and we started to auto-rotate down, and I'd never been involved in a mid-air collision, so I was just watching this thing come at us. It was at this time a light swung 90 degrees from the UFO towards the helicopter, and it came in through the front of the plexiglass, and the entire cabin inside turned green from the light. It was a pyramid-shaped type light that beamed down and came through the front of the helicopter.
How long was your aircraft bathed in this beam?
The light that came into the cockpit apparently lasted only for a few seconds, but it was enough time that I observed the red instrument panel lights utilized for night flying to be absorbed by the green light.
Was it possible for you to determine the outline of this object against the star background?
Yes, sir. It was a cigar-shaped object, like a symmetrical airfoil with the dome on it. It was a solid object. It was a metallic structure to it. And you could see lights reflecting off the structure, and you could not see any of the stars or behind the object itself.
Well, while all this was going on, what was the attitude of the helicopter?
Apparently, when we were supposed to be descending at 2,000 feet a minute at 100 knots, we were climbing at 1,000 feet a minute with the controls still established for a descent. And we went from 1,700 feet up to 3,500 feet and topped out at 3,800 feet. I would like to stress one important fact, and that is there is approximately 20 years of Army aviation experience between the 4 men on board the helicopter that night. We have been trained to follow procedures and regulations in reporting incidents, regardless of how they're accepted. And we try to follow those procedures. And we reported the incident as it occurred and have avoided any speculation on the subject.
That's crazy. It's like he was saying, I don't care what you say, I know what I saw. You try to go down and you end up going up. It's definitely hard to believe a story like that, especially in the 70s with that type of helicopter. Very interesting.
You get charged in a court because you're a battery. A bank is a river bank because it directs the currency. Money is water. This is why we call it liquidity. Money is moony because the moon is feminine. It's water. The sun is fire, masculine. This is why the tides of the ocean follow where the moon is, because it controls water in your body and on the earth. That's why there's a correlation between the moon and the stock market. The moon affects our emotions and our psychology. That's why we call people a lunatic. A lunar is the moon. If your name is in full capital letters, this is not you. It's the cooperation that you subject yourself to. You can't charge a natural body, but you can charge a cooperation. You subject yourself to the cooperation. That's why you're called a corpse when you die. To learn more, join the university.
When Werner von Braun was dying of cancer, he asked me to be his spokesperson, to appear on occasions when he was too ill to speak. And I did. And what he asked me to do was to educate decision makers and the public about why we shouldn't be putting weapons in space, why they're a dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, untestable, unworkable idea, and what the alternatives are, how we could be building a cooperative space system. What was most interesting to me was a repetitive sentence that he said to me over and over again during the approximately 4 years that I had the opportunity of working with him, and that was the strategy that was being used to educate the public and decision makers, and the scare tactics, the spin that was being put on a weapons system. And that was how we identify an enemy. The enemy, at first, he said, the enemy against whom we're going to build a space-based weapon system that he thought was a ridiculous idea, unnecessary and very dangerous, not to mention too costly, etc. The strategy that Werner von Braun taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in '74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the next enemy was asteroids. Now, at this point, he kind of chuckled the first time he said it. Asteroids, against asteroids, we're going to build space-based weapons. So it was funny then. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens. And all of it, he said, is a lie. A lie. So when I hear that there's a possible threat of extraterrestrials, and I look at the history of thousands of years of possible visitations, recorded history, and when I hear now the stories of the disclosures of honest military intelligence industry people who have had experiences with UFOs, with crashes and landings, with live or dead bodies of extraterrestrial beings, people from out in the universes. And if I'm ever told that these are enemies against whom we have to build space-based weapon systems, based on my own personal experience of having worked in the military-industrial complex on weapon systems and military strategy, I'm going to know it's a lie. It's a lie. And I'm not only not going to believe it, but I'm going to go out as loudly as I can and tell everyone to take a look. They have not taken us away yet. we're still here after thousands of years of visits, if in fact they're still visiting us now, and people are working with ETs, live or dead, if they're taking photographs, if they're experiencing all kinds of UFO experiences, then we have to look at this as something that is not a hostile occurrence. It would be my guess, based on my own experience of having traveled to countries whom we've been told had hostile intentions against the United States, it would be my hope and my intention to do everything I could to work with people who are working to communicate with and cooperate with these extraterrestrial beings, because they're clearly not hostile.
And that's a wrap. Hope you enjoyed tonight's rabbit hole. Before we go, I want to give a huge shout out to M. Butters on becoming the channel's newest member. Thanks, M. I appreciate your support. Peace and blessings. If you haven't already, please take a second
just to smash that like, subscribe, ring that notification bell,
just to make sure the algorithm knows what's up. So what we gonna do, y'all? That's right. Run these numbers up. Thanks again. Until next time.